Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Leading from Alignment. This is episode 181, and as you can tell, or if you're watching, you know right now. If you're listening, you're going to find out in just a second that my co-host Jim Wiegand is not able to join us today. He is out, but we have a special guest with us today on the podcast, Pastor Chris Brooks. Chris is the lead pastor of Woodside Bible Church, which is main campus is located in Troy, Michigan, with many campuses spread across Southeast Michigan. Chris, welcome to the podcast today.
Hey, if you guys just wanted a day off, you could have let me know. You can give Jim a hard time and let him know that
I
if he
will.
did be with me, that was okay. No, I love being with you guys. I love the thought of leading from alignment, and obviously super grateful for you, John. It's great to be here.
Chris, we've had you on the podcast before, but why don't you take just a minute before we jump into the content for episode 181? Just tell us a little bit about yourself again. Maybe a little
Yeah,
of your background and what you're currently doing for those who didn't hear you the last time we had you on the podcast.
yeah. Born and raised in Michigan. My dad was a high school teacher, social studies teacher. Mom was in the telephone industry business. And I think that is reflective in who I am, this combination of a passion for both teaching and business. And for me, it all fleshed itself out in the pastorate. I spent some time before I went into pastoral ministry, working in the financial services industry as a financial advisor after graduating from Michigan State, but really found my sense of calling and fulfillment and purpose in pastoral ministry. I pastored for 20 years in inner city Detroit, a thriving church that was committed to missions and evangelism and apologetics and just doing ministry as much as we can the right way. And after that, the Lord, after a short stint in Christian higher education, called me here to Woodside Bible Church. And it's been just a great ride, obviously through a lot of unexpected challenges, such as the global pandemic and social unrest, but through it all, really developing a community that sees the church as spiritual family has been our mission here. And I'm grateful for how it's coming together.
You know, Chris, when we had you on the last time, you talked about this amazing, I don't even know if I want to call it a program. I just think this amazing focus on
Yeah,
the health of your pastors. You
yeah,
and I have talked at length about what's going on in the lives of leaders.
yes,
I've been on your radio show a few times talking about the rate of anxiety and depression and burnout among leaders. And so this is a subject that you and I have talked about at great length. Um,
yes.
and I know that it's near and dear to your heart, the health of leaders. And I believe, and I could be wrong about this, that the staff care emphasis that you've had at Woodside is probably a couple years old now.
Yeah.
Um, and when you were with us last time, you unpacked it for us, but could you give us a brief history of that effort at
Yeah,
Woodside?
it's amazing, John, when you think about how many books of recent have come out on resiliency in ministry, have come out on soul care, integration. It's great in many ways to see this conversation getting legs and spreading. But you've been on the forefront of that, and I would be remiss if I didn't say have had a deep impact on me in a way that I've thought about it, and it's reflected within our church. But also authors like Pete Scazzaro, as well,
Yeah.
John Mark Comer, and others. But it's about 3 years old now. We just begin to think very deeply about where do we care well for our staff and where do we maybe have gaps. I think most churches have congregational care teams that are committed to providing marriage counseling, family support, crises management if a member gets into a situation. that is overwhelming to them. But oftentimes, our staff care plan is not as thorough, as thought through, or as comprehensive. So we just wanted to make sure that we loved our staff well. We want Woodside to not only be a great place to worship, but a safe place to worship, a place where people feel that, man, my soul is being cared for. And part of the reality of that, John, is that I'm convinced there's only two things that happen when someone's soul is not healthy. Either we're going to see a moral breakdown or a physical breakdown. And this
Yeah.
is the reality of when a staff is burnt out. This is the reality of when a staff is not integrating well, leading from alignment well. And so when we did our analysis, a couple of things stood out to us. Number one, we do really well when it comes to crises management, crises care. If it's
Yeah.
a short term, someone's being evicted from their home, someone had a death in the family, someone's in ER, we show up, we're going to feed them, we're going to take care of their family. What we struggled with was long term care. So if someone, instead of being in ER, finds out I got a cancer diagnosis and I got a 4-year, 5-year journey I want to walk through, that was harder for us. And then the other area that we found we didn't do as well in is preventative care. And so we kind of look at it as those three categories of care: preventative care, crises care, and long-term care. And so we wanted to make sure we had a plan in place for all three stages of care for our teams. And then secondarily, we want to look at the whole family. So it's not our employee has more going on in their life than just working for us.
Yeah.
And so how do we help them when they're not here? You know, I think just using higher ed as an example, John, I think the best schools have a game plan for student life outside of the classroom. It's been estimated that students on college campuses spend about 25% of their time in the classroom, 75% of their time outside. And if you're not thinking about how to engage that student outside, then you're going to end up losing that student, or they're going to fail or drop out. So same for us, whatever percentage you assign to it, it's a smaller percentage of the time they spend at the church than what happens in their life outside of it. So we want to make sure that we have a plan for their parenting and supporting them there, their marriage, if they're married, supporting them there, their overall emotional and social and psychological health. We want to make sure we're supporting them.
And you know, when I hear you talk about that, Chris, it just I mean, there's just energy that I feel on the inside because I care about this so much. We are three-part beings, right? We body, soul,
Right.
spirit. We're relational beings. And the health of the relationships that are most important, human relationships, have a huge impact on
Absolutely.
our well-being. They have a huge impact on our productivity as leaders. And so it's you know, as you were sharing there, I didn't realize how comprehensive of an approach that you all are using at Woodside. I'm curious, Chris, from your perspective, what parts of the effort, of the focus on this seem to be working well for you?
Yeah, I think the part that is there's parts that we anticipated would work well that haven't, and then there's parts that we didn't that do. So the part that's really nice is that we're a larger team, and so there's constantly interpersonal issues that have to be worked through with staff members. And so often historically, when interpersonal conflict happens, it doesn't end well. It hadn't ended well. What I am seeing has worked really well is having some place other than HR to go to with interpersonal issues. And really, honestly, having a team in place other than just me. I certainly see myself as part of the staff care team, but it's nice that employees have a place where they can process through their questions, their concerns, their interpersonal issues. The other thing that has gone well is I've seen vast improvement in just the awareness that we are a three-part being.
Yeah.
There's just a lot more awareness that healthiness is a goal for us. So if you were to talk to our team and ask them, and we've had external groups come in and ask our team, what are the goals? You'll hear more than just about attendance, more than just about budgets, more than just about conversions. All of those things have their place, but you'll also hear that we are committed to having a healthy staff and being a healthy church. So I think that's going really well also.
Mm.
Finally, I'll say, I think that we've done a lot of great things in prevention, making
Okay.
sure that we are thinking proactively about work-life balance,
Yeah.
thinking proactively about um, how to handle conflict, those things that typically will take a person out. I'll throw one more in. I said that would be the last. One more is I'm really grateful that we've been able to appreciate groups and teams and people that are often overlooked. Part of what our staff care does for us is to celebrate teams and people and leaders. And so for us, that means our custodians. For us,
Mm.
that may mean those who do security, for us, teams that often may be overlooked that we've been able to celebrate, administrative staff. And
Yeah.
I'm grateful that we've been able to do that.
Yeah, I was thinking about as you were sharing that last piece, what a great place to work where you feel noticed,
Yes.
where
Yeah.
you understand how your role contributes to the larger effort. And there's appreciation extended to you. And all of that, I think we miss that sometimes, Chris, as leaders, the
Yeah.
power of that. It really doesn't cost us much. It costs us some time and some
Yes.
thoughtfulness, but the payoff of that is amazing. And so that's very cool that you're talking about even at that level, how this, it almost seems to me, Chris, like it's become, since we talked last about this, and maybe I'm wrong, that it's become more pervasive
Yes.
within the culture at Woodside. Would that be an accurate thought?
Yeah. I think that with more time, we've been able to build more awareness. We've
Yeah.
also built it into John, our evaluative process. So
Okay.
we use an evaluative process, just like most teams, where you're sitting down a couple times a year with your direct report to say what are the goals, and we have multiple categories, but one of the categories is health. What are the goals that we're going to set together to make sure that you remain healthy? And that could be a reading goal, that could be a sabbatical, that
Mhm.
could be a conference, but we're certainly going to talk through what does health look like. Now, again, I feel great about the progress we've made, but you and I know that what's also accelerated pretty rapidly are the
Mhm.
challenges facing people.
Yeah.
I just did a radio program on a report that just came out about sadness and loneliness among teenage girls.
Yeah.
And I see many of our leaders with their own children going through pretty
Yes.
intense issues. Marriages are facing pretty intense issues. The repercussions of many of the COVID policies are being felt. Obviously, economic pressures. So
Yeah.
I would just simply say we still feel like we're fighting an uphill battle, but
Mm.
with God's grace and by the power of His Spirit, we feel like we're making real good progress on the health front.
I read this last week that 33, this came from the CDC, 33% of young girls in the United States have considered suicide.
Yes,
33%.
yeah, yes,
I don't know. That's shocking.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, but the reality behind that, John, is that social isolation has accelerated. So
Yes.
girls who have friends that were a part of, you talk about the importance of relational strength, part of their mental health, where friendships, you send them through multiple years where that's disconnected. I think the
Right.
reports from Instagram itself that have come out, where you got a third of teens saying Instagram makes me feel worse about myself,
Mm.
but yet I cannot stop logging in. So there's a social addiction
Yeah.
there, while at the same time knowing it is producing a lot of unhealth. And then there's also our parenting style. And I can be
Mm.
guilty of this too, which is they call it lawnmower parenting. And that is, let me mow down every obstacle that my kid ever encounters so that they won't feel
Mm.
any discomfort or challenge. And I know I'm tempted to parent that way. But when you think about it, overcoming some of those obstacles is what made us who we are.
That's
And
right.
when we mow down every obstacle for our kids, we aren't preparing them for the real world. So when they face that, yeah, it's going to be overwhelming for them. So I'm not down on this generation. I'm very much
Yeah.
pro Gen Z, pro millennials. I think they have so much that they're teaching us, so much to offer. My heart is heavy for all that they're facing, though.
Right.
But as it pertains to staff health, if you want to know what we're thinking about now, we're really thinking about kids, the kids of our staff. So
Yeah.
much of it started, if I could just say the progression, it started with us thinking about the staff member themselves. Then we started thinking about marriages. Now we're thinking about kids. And what do we do to engage them so that their story? Here's the thing, you and I know the typical story of a PK is that, man, ministry pulled my parent away from us.
Right.
We were less healthy because of their ministry commitments. They were my mom or dad were more lonely, more drained, less available. And so this has been the story of many generations of PKs. Now, in
Yeah.
previous generations, there was almost this happy sacrifice, this sense of we're sacrificing so that dad or mom could serve Jesus and do great things. But somewhere along the way, that turned to resentment.
Yeah.
And now you got generations who deeply resent the
Right.
fact that mom and dad were called by Jesus, serving the church, traveling the globe, ministering to people. And so with this generation, I hope that their story is, yeah, I came from a church that cared for us well. I came from a church that provided opportunities for me to have space to talk through as a teenager my obstacles, that sent us on vacation, that provided counseling for us. This is a therapeutic generation. And so those
Mm.
types of things are things that we're thinking about.
Yeah. Wow. One of the things I've admired about you, Chris, and I've seen this a little bit from a distance, um, is the priority of your family.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
I see shots of you on social
Yes.
media with your kids, with your wife, and as a person who's called to come alongside leaders and help, um, I watch that and I just think I'm happy for you, first of all, and your wife and your children, but I'm just gratified by the message that is sending. Uh, you know, um, when 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 you and I pass from this life, I'm pretty
Yeah.
sure none of our clients are going to be there.
Yeah. That's right.
Probably
That's right.
none of our congregational members are going to be there. Who's going to be
Yeah.
there? It's gonna be our
Yeah.
kids. It's going to be,
Yeah.
and I feel I'm so grateful for that emphasis, for that perspective. I think it's incredibly healthy, and the priority of it just seems right to me, Chris. So man, that's
Yeah.
so cool.
Thank you. Yeah, I love my family, and right back at you, because I know the same to be true about you. And I definitely don't want to forsake our first ministry, and I just really do believe
Right.
first ministry is family. I had a older leader say to me once. We were in a conversation, and I told him about. He said, "How many kids do you got?" And I told him how many kids I had, and what was going on with my family. He says, "Chris, you're a wealthy man."
Mhm.
And I said, "What do you mean by that?" And he says, wealth isn't measured in dollars and cents. It's measured in the family and the people you love.
Yep.
And I just, believe that, man, my long-term story is going to be my relationships, and hopefully my
Yep.
family relationships tell the best of our story.
That's so good. Well, Chris, we're starting to butt up against time, but I have one more question for you because I
Sure.
know that there are leaders who are listening to this or watching this who, and they have churches of multiple different sizes.
Yes.
Um, very few of them are probably the size of Woodside, but many of our listeners have churches of 100, 150,
Yeah.
200, 500. And this whole thought process of staff care might seem like this overwhelming like thing. And how could a church, regardless of its size, get started with a similar effort to care for their leaders and their leaders' families?
Yeah, I would say number one, man, what a blessing it is if you can get this early. It's almost like the smaller the
Mm.
better. It's much harder to try to implement something like this later on when
Yeah,
cultural systems are set and not necessarily conducive for it. But I would say that, man, just start talking about it as a value. Make it one of your values that we care for our people, and we want to make sure those that work here are cared for well. Make it a value, and honor that value, and then set some simple goals that you're going to put in place, like, for example, Sabbath rhythms. I don't care what
yeah,
size you are, having a day a week that even in my previous church, which was much smaller than Woodside, we had a day a week where we tried to enforce to the staff, hey, you need that day a week for your own family. And then as a pastor, I would say try to model health as much as you can. And as you do, talk to your team about why you are modeling health, or why you're making some of the sacrifices that you're making in ministry. Sometimes we have sacrificed health at the altar of productivity, but in the
yeah.
long term, our sustainability depends on the health of our own soul. And I don't want to be the next statistic, John. I don't want to be the next story that you hear of a pastor who fell because of private or secret sins, or didn't integrate my faith well. I wanted, and all of that is God's grace, but I want to have a testimony. And so I would say make it a value, set some simple goals, maybe some books you guys can read,
Yeah.
reach out and get advice and counsel like I have from people like yourself, and just start there.
Awesome. Well, Chris, thank you so much for spending time with us today. And if you're listening or watching and you'd like to reach out to us here at Converge Coaching, it's very simple. Just go to convergecoach.com and click on the Contact Us button, and that gives you a free 30-minute conversation with somebody on our team. And maybe that's all you're going to need is 30 minutes just with somebody who is a dispassionate listener, and can hear you out. And maybe you'll need more than that. And we have ways to help you. And oftentimes we get calls for help, and it's outside of our lane. And but we have a good network, and we're able to connect you to somebody who can help you. So we uh, we appreciate what all of you who are listening and watching do for a living. We know that there is great reward in pastoral ministry, but there's also great challenges. And we're here to cheer you on as you continue to lead from alignment.